South Korea's population may have held steady over the past decade, but beneath the surface, the country's demographic landscape is undergoing a profound transformation. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective for this Thursday, July 30th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea is undergoing a major demographic shift from a rapidly aging population to changing family trends. So to discuss what's driving these changes, I have freelance journalist Yang Chien-Hao here in the studio. Chien-Hao, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Chien-Hao, we start with you. South Korea's population stands at 51 million, and it's remained virtually unchanged over the past 11 years. But there's a new demographic report now saying that we are aging even faster, though. Do tell us more.
Yes, according to the latest 2025 population and housing census released by the South Korean National Data Agency just 2 days ago, the country's population fell to 49 million last year, and down 54,000 people, or 0.1% from a year earlier. And at the same time, the number of foreign residents climbed to 2 million, an increase of 66,000 or 3.2%. And in other words, as South Korea's native population continues to shrink, the gap is increasingly being filled by foreign residents. And as you just mentioned, South Korea's aging crisis is accelerating, and these latest figures paint an even more concerning picture. People aged like 65 or older now totally like 10 million, up 600,000 or 5.9% from a year ago. And for the first time over, seniors make up more than 20% of the total population. That means 1 in every 5 South Korean now it is over 65 years old. And meanwhile, the working age population fell by 393,000 to 35.87 million, dropping below 70% of the population for the very first time. And the country's aging index also continued to rise, increasing from 186.7 to 205.2. Put simply, for every 100 children, South Korea now has about 205 senior citizens. And population aging is no longer limited to a handful of regions. Looking at the smaller administrative districts, including the cities and counties under the provinces, as well as districts within metropolitan cities, 224 out of 229 areas, or nearly 98%, now have more people aged 65 and over than children under 15 years old. And we talked many times on this program about the South Koreans' aging population issues and persistently low birth rate. And today's census results confirm that these long-term demographic trends are not only continuing, but become even more pronounced and serious.
Right, indeed. Colin, as Chien-Hao has said, South Korea's foreign population, it continues to grow. It now accounts for between 3 to 4% of the total population. What are the broader implications of this demographic reality?
Yes, I had this figure in mind today on my way to the studio, because I think I encountered, or saw anyway, thousands and thousands of people, and very few of those were visibly foreign. And I didn't hear many languages other than Korean, although I was hearing some Mandarin, especially when I was at the Shinsegae department store, but they might have been shopping tourists. In any case, the great majority of foreigners here, I believe, are still Chinese. In any case, if we look at these figures, I could have sworn it was just, when I got here 10 years ago, the number was 2%. South Korea was 2% foreign. Now it's 3 to 4, as you say. And so media stories have been covering what constitutes that addition, the growth in the foreign population. And if you look at it, half of the growth is international students, and they don't tend to stay, sort of by definition. Some do, most don't. The rest include foreign, like seasonal laborers and business people on special purpose visas. So in the main, or in the vast majority, these are not foreigners that we would consider to be immigrants in the Western sense. They don't necessarily come to stay. Some do stay, the majority don't. Whether students will come or go sort of depends on how they get along with South Korea and whether they find a permanent economic place here or a social role, which can still be fairly difficult. Though, as I understand it, that is changing little by little, but I would say that though the growth seems large, the growth in the number does seem large, for the most part, it's not the kind of growth that I think makes a permanent change in the demographics of the country or the social makeup of the country.
Right. Moving forward, Chien-Hao, earlier this year, Taiwan, it officially became a super-age society with more than 20% of its population aged 65 and older. How would you compare South Korea and Taiwan in terms of the causes of low birth rates and perhaps the policies to better address them?
Indeed, these two countries have already reached a very similar milestone earlier this year. As you mentioned, in January, the Ministry of Interior in Taiwan officially announced that people aged 65 or older now account for 20% of the population, meaning Taiwan has officially entered the ranks of super-aged societies. There's another worrying trend as well, and Taiwan's total population fell by 101,000 people last year, comparing with 2024, making the second consecutive year of population decline. And in many ways, Taiwan and South Korea have been facing the same demographic challenges, and year after year, the two countries rank among those with the world's lowest birth rates, while both are also experiencing rapid population aging. And over the past decade, we can see both countries' governments have introduced a wide range of incentives aimed at encouraging people to have children, to boost the fertility, from monthly child allowances, for example, and paid parental leave to expanded childcare and preschool subsidies. But despite years of these policies or this assistance, neither country has been able to reverse the decline in births. So in other words, governments have spent tons of money, enormous amounts of money, trying to boost the fertility, yet the result have fallen well short of expectations. And at the same time, cutting those programs could make the situation even worse. So it's become one of the toughest policy dilemmas facing for both governments. I've been thinking these issues about about the past few days, but honestly, I still can't have an answer, you know. Many people point to one major factor, it is housing. Since Taiwan and South Korea, now the two countries are struggling with high housing prices, making it increasingly difficult for especially young people to afford a house or feel financially secure enough to start a family. But that also makes me think about another case, which is Singapore, because Singapore, the country, is well known for its extensive public housing system, the HDB flats, and it also offers generous family and child care support. Yet even those policies in place, Singapore's fertility rate fell to a record low to 0.87 last year. So perhaps the issue goes beyond financial incentives or housing alone. It raises a broader question. Are people in all three countries, in all these three societies, reluctant to bring children into an environment defined by intensive educational competition, high pressure, and growing uncertainty about the future? And that's a question that deserves much deeper reporting, research, and public discussion.
You're right then. With regard to the factors behind the birth rates, Colin, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you've previously said that Korea's low birth rate reflects the Korean tendency to think rationally. Do you care to elaborate?
Well, I think what I might have meant by that was it's rational in the same sense that many other decisions made here are rational, in that on a personal, individual level they make sense, whereas in the wider picture of society they might have a more negative effect, shall we say. I mean, the choices Koreans make within the education system, for example, are individually rational, but if you look at how the whole thing works, you might question what's going on. Is this ideal, or is this even close to ideal? The same with the birth rate. And for all the reasons Chien-Hao mentioned, Koreans have been making rational responses to the economic conditions they see before them and the social conditions they see before them. But as well, as you say, the increase in the birth rate also has a kind of rationality, you could say. Partially, it's demographic. There's a cohort that's slightly larger in their mid-30s right now in South Korea. And so especially when the women get to that age, a certain rational calculation happens. It's probably now or never. And so they seem to have found a way of making that happen, but also response to the economic incentives the government has been putting out with the direct cash payments and the host of other incentives to have children. And as well, I mean, we can't totally discount the effect of some of the public service announcement campaigns and the spots you see on TV and the sort of uri ai, uri mire, all this stuff that's been going on these past few years. It's not, I mean, I say this as a father of two fairly recently, it's not without its emotional effect. I will say it's pretty well done. But I think there is the rational side and the emotional side. Both of them are in play, but then pure demographics is also a big part of this. You know, you have a slightly larger cohort, they're going to have a slightly larger cohort beneath them, the one to which they give birth.
Right. Chien-Hao, let's now touch upon a regional demographic phenomenon. According to the foreign media, grey divorce initiated by women is on the rise here in East Asia. How is this phenomenon being explained?
It's indeed a very hot issue recently. Like Eastern Asian countries are not only grappling with falling birth rates and rapidly aging populations. Another demographic trend drawing increasing attention is that you just mentioned the great divorce, couples ending long marriage later in their lives, and mostly it was like being made by women, but by the wives. In South Korea, the number of divorces among couples married for 30 years or more surpassed for those first time last year. The number of divorces among couples who had been married for less than 5 years. And similar trends have also been seen in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, and China. And also, meanwhile, in Japan, we have a figure that the number of older women filing for divorce in 2024 was about twice that of older men. And 30 or 40 years ago, you know, divorce carried a strong social stigma or bias across most of the East Asian countries, especially for women. Men who initiated divorce generally face few social consequences, but women were often subject to discrimination or placed at a disadvantage both economically and socially. However, now societies have changed dramatically as we see like more women have gained access to higher education and even they can enter to the workforce and achieve greater financial independence than before. And as gender gaps have narrowed, the women have gained a, how can I say, like strong voice in both society and their own lives. Many women no longer have to rely entirely on their husbands for financial security. Even so, many women still feel constrained with traditional marriages where they believe that they are expected to accept unequal gender roles or male-dominated family dynamics. For some, divorce becomes the only way to move forward after years of frustrations. Today, you can say like divorce has become far more socially accepted than it once was. For many women, it is no longer seen as something shameful. Instead, it can represent a new beginning, a chance to choose the kind of life they want to live. And personally, I see this trend in a very positive way. If a marriage is no longer provides mutual respect or happiness, then people should have the freedom to make a different choice. At the same time, I believe it also serves as a reminder that men should make a greater effort to understand their partners and build more equal relationships.
Right then, Colin, as Chien-Hao has said, the attitude, the public attitude towards divorce has changed even here in South Korea. What have you been observing?
I analogize it in a way to the attitude towards tattoos, especially as seen in the Korean media. When I got here a little over a decade ago, you'd have these rappers going on talk shows and they'd have their arms bandaged up. And clearly the bandages, which were not very convincing, covered tattoos. And I would always think like, is this going to be a society with tattoos or without? Like, pick one or the other. Don't put up the image of one and then be another. Because you'd go to Hongdae and see they were very popular. A lot of tattooed young people. Nowadays, I mean, that's kind of passé. Tattoo removal clinics are doing a big business these days. But in any case, with divorce, it was the same in a way. You know, even when I got here, there was sort of the sense that we don't do that in Korea. But there were plenty of what's called show window marriages, where functionally, emotionally, the marriage had ended a long time ago. It's just they presented the facade to the social world around them of still being married. But that would be the substitute for legal divorce that was socially acknowledged. Now, you know, that's been getting more and more accepted. It's not uncommon to meet a divorcee or who refers to themselves as dolshing, single again, essentially, you know, in a kind of fun way, which is not something they would have done 20 years ago. But it also reflects a difference in the standing of marriage itself in Korean society as a way of organizing society or organizing the families that made up Korean society. Now, somebody can live a life integrated into society at large without being a part of a marriage or part of the wider family structure the marriage brings you into. And that can be a change for good and bad. I mean, they can have all kinds of effects, but it is certainly a change compared to the way Korea had been for a very long time beforehand. And what effects that will finally have, I think it'll take a long time to see as well.
Right, indeed. Chien-Hao, the rising grey divorce, pundits say it could reshape the country's aging population. What changes should society be preparing for, according to these pundits?
Try to think about it. If more and more old couples are getting divorced, it also means that we're likely to see a growing number of older adults living alone in the future, in the years ahead. That will create new challenges for a government. Many seniors may need stronger social welfare support, along with mental health services, counseling, and help adjusting to a completely different stage of life. None of those issues will be easy to address or to improve. Another common challenge across Eastern Asian countries is elderly poverty. South Korea, for example, continues to record one of the highest old age poverty rates among the OECD countries. And just imagine the situation. A retired couple goes through a divorce, and one spouse suddenly loses not only emotional support, but also financial stability. The psychological impact can be severe, and some may withdraw from society, lose motivation, and even spend money recklessly or become more vulnerable to fraud or financial scams like sagi. Over time, they could fall into poverty and creating a growing population of economically and socially vulnerable seniors. And that's why I believe that the governments need to recognize this emerging trend before it becomes a much larger problem. Building a stronger social safety net and intervening early with financial assistance, mental health support, and community services will be essential to helping vulnerable seniors maintain both their dignity and their quality of life.
Right then. Colin, let's end on a positive note, if you will. Marriages between South Korean men and Japanese women have more than doubled over the past 3 years, according to statistics, with many claiming that the influence of K-pop is behind this trend. Do you think the Korean wave is reshaping Korea's family structures?
It's doing its part, I'm sure, at least according to the Japanese mainstream media, which is covering this phenomenon and emphasizing that this is only 2026, so 8 years after the big No Japan protests. We all remember people were in the streets, there were banners up, boycotts, Japanese beer disappeared from the convenience stores, which I used to buy, and so I was inconvenienced. But it's amazing to see how that has been erased from the public memory. You go out in the streets of Seoul, certain neighborhoods, go to Samgakji, you see more Japanese writing on these cafes and bars and restaurants than you do Hangul. And so I think the era of No Japan is behind us for now, but as well, this has become its own sort of K-culture, if you like, because in Japan, the media have covered the angle of the YouTubers, the YouTubing couples. There's a word they have in Japanese. It is it Nikan? Nihon Kankoku, Nikan couple. So Japanese Korean couple. And this is a genre of YouTuber, or these couples usually living here, sometimes in Japan. They go over the cultural differences they encounter, how they build a life together and all that. And there are lots of them, and they're fun to watch. I've seen a few myself. But it really reveals that anything can be made content, and as well, it shows you what might be going on between this particular combination of Korean man, Japanese woman, because if you follow the media about this, there's been so much coverage, even in the West, of Korean women kind of putting their foot down about certain elements, certain aspects of Korean marriage, not wanting to date, not wanting to marry, Korean women recusing themselves from the dating market. And then in Japan, you see a lot of stories coming out of there about the men resigned to just never dating, not interested, I'm going to stay home and play video games and watch anime, forget it. Like, they seem to be checked out to some degree too. So it's not a big surprise that Korean men and Japanese women would find each other. And indeed, that's what's been happening in recent years. The rate has doubled, I think, in 2 or 3 years. And it probably will keep going as K-pop culture, broadly speaking, absorbs this idea of the Korean-Japanese couple and all of the fun and enlightening and perhaps uplifting content it provides as well. As long as they stay together, we'll see. In the fullness of time, we'll see.
Right, as long as they stay happily married together then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Colin, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Chien-Hao, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, South Korea's demographic transformation is already reshaping the way people live, work and build families. As these trends continue, the challenge will be finding new ways to adapt to a changing society, as Colin mentioned earlier. Thanks for watching.